I've said many times in our own organization that if you're not happy here, please don't stay. And if it's not enjoyable, please, this is the wrong place for you. If you're not coming to work happy, wrong place for you.
One problem I see that leaders have not been holding people accountable to good behavior. They ignore toxic behavior from high producers.
This comes down to a lack of leadership and accountability.
Employers don't do very well at teaching managers.
We've talked in the past about the temperature has gotten very high.
The question is, what's the organization doing that's causing burnout?
So why do they care about results more than people when the results come from the people? When we now have AI, ask ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity to analyze all of the company Glassdoor ratings. Welcome, Catherine Mattice, to another Meet the Gurus. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
I am really excited to learn a little about you and your organization and where you focus your time and effort.
So Civility Partners was founded 16 years ago on the premise that everyone at every level in every organization around the world should feel valued and respected and good at work. We get a lot of our self-esteem from what we do for a living, and it's very important to me. So we are really culture consultants. We come in and help organizations that have had some sort of culture problem present itself, and we do a survey so that we can understand what employees need and where the problems are. And then we help the organization craft an action plan and implement whatever's on there to help improve the culture. And, certainly that also involves a lot of coaching and training as part of what we're working on. Just making sure the organization is living its own core values.
Kind of sounds like, on some level, hard solutions to soft problems. I mean,
Yes.
I don't know if I would describe it exactly. Hard meaning not difficult, but tangible, measurable, and ones where you can really implement and get results.
Yes, we pride ourselves on really making culture a very tangible process that can be strategic. And just like you have your strategy for growing your business and what have you, culture can be seen very much the same way.
Well, great to see you again, Catherine. I'm so glad to have you here on another session of Meet the Gurus.
I'm happy to be here. It's nice to see you again.
Well, we've talked in the past about the world has become, the environment that companies have become, and society in general, obviously. And, it's elevated. The temperature has gotten very high. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, I'm not an expert in this field, of course, but I can see it and I think that in some ways I can see broadly, not talking about country leadership or business leadership particularly, but it seems that a lot of this comes down to a lack of leadership and accountability. You're an expert in the field, and I'd love to hear what your view is on, and not to get into politics, but to get into the world we live in today and the way people treat each other in all sorts of environments, including the work world.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what you think about that kind of take about leadership and about accountability for behavior.
Yeah, that's a big question. I'll say that one problem I see in organizations I go into is that leaders have not been holding people accountable to good behavior, which is what you're saying. And in fact, they ignore toxic behavior from high producers. And so then people start to figure out that I can bully people or, beat people up metaphorically. And if I'm getting results, then I'm actually being celebrated for that behavior and how I get results. And so that infiltrates into the organization. The other piece of that is employers don't do very well at teaching managers how to coach, how to hold people accountable for good behavior. If I get promoted tomorrow from an employee to a manager, I know, if you're late all the time, I write you up and whatever. But I don't know, unless I've been explicitly told, that if you're gossiping or doing things that harm others or hurting people's feelings, that I'm supposed to step in and solve that. So those are two big things I see all the time in terms of accountability or lack thereof.
So let me ask you something that sometimes people ask in terms of a business or a business problem or a new venture, the 5 whys. So I'm going to ask you, Why do organizations permit a lack of accountability?
I believe one is if they're too focused on results and not enough focused on how, like, the employee experience, that all, employee experience goes by the wayside. They get results, so who cares how they act? I
Okay, so
think
one, go ahead.
that's
I'm sorry.
one why.
That's
Yeah.
one why. So
Yeah.
why do they care about results more than people when, and I won't answer the question for you, but I think why do they care about that when the results come from the people?
That is a great question, Paul, that I've been trying to answer myself all, all these years. But I can tell you, basically it's that if I decide I want, as a CEO, I want people to behave a certain way, or I care about how they feel, then I have to put money towards that. And there isn't necessarily an ROI for that unless I take the time to plot it out, versus if
Ah,
I
okay.
hire a marketing company to get me leads, there's an ROI. So it's too fuzzy for a lot of CEOs to really see the ROI.
Second,
Mhm.
why is it too fuzzy?
It's not a profit and loss item. I can't see the damage on my profit and loss statement of turnover. There's all sorts of research that says it costs money, but
Correct?
it's not on the profit and loss. I can't see that productivity went down 30% while we were trying to hire a new person, because everyone's still getting results and the company's still fine, right? So it's like these hidden costs that don't show up on a profit and loss statement.
Next, why? Why are there hidden costs? Why is it hidden? Why is it hidden? Because do they not realize that you have to, it's very expensive to find a new employee. It's very expensive to get litigation. It's very expensive if, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or the world's best manager to realize if you don't build your employees or your ratings go down, you're going to have a very expensive time hiring people. We happen to have a fantastic 4.8, 4.9 rating, and that's why we focus on the people. But why don't they understand that? Has no one ever taught them that? Does the management not understand there's a real measurable cost to their
Yeah.
hiring costs and to their retention and to the next salaries they have to pay to induce someone to come to work for a toxic company?
I don't think they do. And that's a lot of what I work on with HR. That's who we partner with, is HR. And I spend a lot of time trying to help them find all the numbers and the costs that will make sense or matter to their CEO. And so what has to happen is HR or somebody has to take the time to say, here's how many hours I've spent on this problem of turnover. Here's how many hours people spent training new hires. Here's how much work we
Right.
didn't do because we were, instead of 10 widgets, we only built 8 widgets. Somebody has to take the time to figure all of that out and present it to the CEO.
Now,
And then a lot of CEOs don't even pay attention to that. I don't think they teach in business school. I mean, I just feel like turnover is expensive is something we all throw out, and we all
right.
know it, but CEOs don't take the time to really care enough about it to understand.
I think that the next and last why would be when we now have AI, it's not a
Mhm.
pivot to AI, but it's a question about AI.
Mhm.
Why couldn't someone do an analysis, which I'll probably want to do after our podcast today?
Yeah.
Ask ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity and everyone, maybe to have them talk to each other and say, analyze all of the company Glassdoor ratings, the cost of hire, the average salaries, the cost of retention, and tell me what is the measurable cost to a company that has 0 to 100 employees, 101 to 250, blah, 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 and give me a metric. And I bet you'd see a curve. And it would be maybe not a normal curve, maybe not a normal, not normal is the wrong word, but maybe not an arc that bigger companies have much higher costs. I don't know. Maybe
Mhm.
there's bumps along the road. But I would bet you that someone would be able to do the analytics, and maybe there are companies that have done that. But maybe that's the problem at the core root of it. No one's presented the data that say, here's the math. Don't believe me? Here's the math.
In my experience, there's lots of numbers out there. Burnover
Sure.
costs United States businesses X number of billions of dollars per year. And there's tons and tons and tons of research that burnout's expensive, turnover's expensive. But I have come to see over the years and really believe CEOs have a hard time with that generic number. So even if we did that AI exercise, which now you've got me thinking about doing it myself, it's
Yeah.
still, and then if I do all of that and then I take it to my boss as a CEO and say, here's what ChatGPT says about it. It's still a generic number. And that's the disconnect between HR and CEOs. HR needs to get a lot better at thinking like a business person and an owner and an entrepreneur. So as long as those numbers remain generic, it's going to be hard. And that's what I see all the time. It's HR is always in an uphill battle. And I ask myself all the time, why don't CEO? I mean, it's good business sense. People like working for you. They're going to produce more. We shouldn't need all this research, but it's not working.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The big words these days are inference models and
Mhm.
RAGs and all sorts of custom data sets that allow a big organization to start plumbing that information. But given that it's not, it doesn't require a 6-month research study by a big,
Yeah.
benefits consulting company these days. It probably requires just a few of these models in 15 minutes. If I'm sure that's an exaggeration, but it requires a little bit of probing. It would be
Mhm.
interesting to see if that, and then you say, here's how many employees you have. Here, show me your turnover rate. Show me, let me then just do the math. And it's now cost you $15 million or $500,000, however big the company is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a real, especially now in an environment where people are concerned about the future, even though the US market is pretty strong. No one knows what's going to happen next year in general, but no one knows given this tariff situation, et cetera. I wonder, the feeling of, now I've never been in this kind of setting, so I can't speak to this, and I don't know how much of it is gender specific, but bullying and unsafety and the lack of, maybe that comes down to a trust issue also. Does the manager exude trustworthiness?
Mhm.
And you're the expert in this area, of course, and I can only tell you that in my experience, it seems very weird that you would run an organization where you did not exude trust. And I wonder how many organizations you walk into is a foundational fifth why or third why, where why does this happen? Why, and this, we don't trust the managers, we don't trust our colleagues. So I wonder if that is, if you were to ask do the five whys and end up the second one is we lack trust. How
Yeah.
often do you think that is a foundational problem?
Well, it's 100% of the problem in my clients. That's why they contact us. Is trust
Okay.
is the culture is broken. I think
Wow.
we're up against some different things. One is kind of the old way of work. Is you went to work, you got a paycheck, and that was the exchange. And trust and relationships were sort of out of it, right? You were
Interesting.
just there as a cog in a wheel. And
Right.
as newer generations are coming into the workplace, we're hearing phrases like employee experience, employee engagement, and employees want to grow and they want
Yeah.
feedback. That's all fairly new. So I think of like some of the clients that I'm running through my head that I've had where the CEO didn't care whether or not people trusted him. It was all business, and it was very
I
much
started
like, why
laughing because
can't everyone just be like me? Yeah,
that seems so
and they don't
bizarre. I mean,
trust their employees.
maybe I'm a outlier, but I just hard for
Yeah,
me to
well, then
even
they don't trust
grasp
their
that.
employees either. They micromanage, they lead by fear because and it boils down to their own feelings of inadequacy, that
Right.
they're projecting. But, yeah,
Right.
it's very common for leaders to forget that trust is super important. In fact, that's one of our survey questions we ask, rate
Right.
the extent that you trust the leader.
Yeah. And
Real
it's
quick, I wanna go back to our last conversation about cost. I did wanna say on Civility Partners website, we actually have a culture calculator, and what we've done is taken some of this research. MIT says turnover costs X amount per employee and so on,
mhm.
and so people can actually fill out some real numbers and then it compares their numbers to that data and we actually spit out a cost. So we're trying to
Right.
help get that number out.
Oh, great. Thank you. And we'll see if we can share that in whatever links we provide on this when this
Yeah.
gets published. It's remarkable to me that the idea, I mean, it's sort of hard for me to even conceive of how an organization could believe that, fear or anything else, would be the reason that someone comes to work. It's the reason probably someone stops coming to work because they're afraid of the environment. It's hard, and it's hard for me to also conceive how someone could think that lack of transparency or lack of trustworthiness, I don't know, value proposition. I've said many times in our own organization, which has grown quite extraordinarily, that if you're not happy here, please don't stay. If you're not trusting, if you don't trust your colleagues, and I also say what's kind of interesting, and I've had this experience from many years ago. If you are not, look, you're many people are young in our organization. At the same, you should feel that even if you leave here, you've built a network of people that you can always turn to. And some people in their 20s often don't realize that you're building networks,
Yeah.
and that you may not like where you're working, but don't burn bridges, don't burn the relationships you have, forget the management of the company, don't burn the relationships with people you work with, because at some point or another you're all going to go on to something presumably similar in a different industry, or maybe a different company, or maybe a different country. But the idea that someone could think that running a company based on fear does anything other than destroy the culture and destroy the economics of a business is kind of shocking to me. But I guess there are companies out there that believe, it's an old school world.
Reason they believe it is they see success. So thinking of a current client we have right now, built up a $31 million company. He has proof that he's a great business owner. And so he's looking at the numbers. So that's the problem, is that some companies are too focused on results and numbers and money and that sort of thing, that they forget the people part. And so they're not
Sure.
recognizing that you're successful, you've done pretty well, but you could actually probably do even better if people felt
Sure.
better at work. But they have a hard time with that. And I'll just share one ironic thing I see a lot in owners like that, is that there's no room for emotions, right? We're here to do business. We're not getting vulnerable. We're just here to get our work done. Meanwhile, they're very emotional and they're yelling there. And
Sure.
it's interesting. It's like, you're actually being very vulnerable. For someone who says you don't like vulnerability, yelling
Sure.
really shows vulnerability. So
Yeah, that's a bizarre. To me, I just can't understand. It's quite a bizarre attitude, and I don't understand how that's successful. There's always an expression that the top of one mountain is the base of the next.
yeah,
And anyone who's had any experience has reached a certain age, and you certainly reach people who are in their 70s and 80s and even 90s. They say it's a journey, right? The result is not what you're looking for. It's the process, it's the growth, and to me, success is the daily grind. If the wrong word, grind is probably not the right word. The daily experience of
yeah,
working and enjoying what you do and feeling you've built something with the
hmm,
people you're working with, and you say that's part of your family. I say this all the time. People I work with, this is an extended family, right? And if it's not enjoyable, please, this is the wrong place for you. If you're not coming to work happy, wrong place for you. Now, if you have personal situations, et cetera, that is always probably, maybe I'll get to the question of burnout and overwork in some cultures. But I wonder, what are the obviously the telltale signs people taking offs or vacations or sick leaves when they're not sick. But how do you know that the culture, let's say not a person, but how do you begin to see the telltale signs of a culture which is burning out, that is not thriving and growing? Are there some telltale signs you could point to?
for sure. Well, some things to observe is, what's the feeling when someone does go on vacation or takes the day off? Do people kind of guilt them, like, oh, you're leaving? Are you going to check emails? Or is it celebrated? Great, get the heck out of here. I don't want to hear from you until you come back. So that's an example of people feeling burned out, because they're kind of like, don't leave. You're going on vacation. Wait. Um, Certainly, turnover, people leaving says there's something wrong with your culture. The main thing that organizations need to think about is, what are we doing that causes burnout? And a lot of organizations have all these, here's free apps and individual things that we're giving you to help with your burnout. The question isn't, how do we help individuals stop being burnt out? The question is, what's the organization doing that's causing burnout? And you got to
Right.
backpedal and look at the root cause first. So there's lots of signs. People shouldn't be working 10 hours a day every single day. It happens
Sure.
sometimes, but another thing to look at is, if you're in billable hours, for example. If people are doing 100% billable hours, when are they doing all of the other stuff that comes with being on a team? When are they having team meetings? When are they having lunch with their colleagues? When are they doing coaching and mentoring? So that's another kind of easy quantitative thing to look at.
Yeah, I mean, this other thing that I touched on, we didn't really go deep into, but the idea of safety, psychological safety is a very hard to measure thing, I would imagine. Certainly, interpersonal safety. Obviously, a lot of people are working remotely, so there's maybe less of that. But at the same time, yeah, there's people who feel snubbed, not seen. Often, when I've been in big meetings and I have silence when I ask a question, there's no one answers it. I'll call on someone in a nice way. Hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. How do you make someone come out of a shell where they're feeling unsafe? Is it best to do that one on one? Is it best just to do it in a group where you're encouraging them and then they
Yeah.
begin to break down walls? I mean, I've had worked with a lot of people who are very shy. Before you know it, they become less shy. But I've always done it not strategically because I don't have the
Yeah.
experience that you have, for example.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
just do it naturally. I say, in a group setting, I'll ask them a question, and slowly it comes out. Is it better, in your experience, to sort of make people feel safe and address issues like this one on one, or do you then and then is it a group thing? Sorry, I'm
Yeah, sure. This is why diversity and inclusion programs are important because people think differently. So there are introverts on your team, no doubt, that are very uncomfortable answering on the spot. There's also people on your team who like to process information before they answer something, and versus someone like me, I think out loud and talk, and so I'd raise my hand and like, here I'm spitballing, I don't really know what I'm saying. But here's my answer versus someone else would definitely not do that. Some people have ADHD and so they've lost track. So there's a lot of things you can do for your meetings to help keep everyone. One is have an agenda for sure. Asking people to be prepared to answer certain questions or comment on those items on the agenda. And then also making it clear that, hey, if you're not willing, if you don't want to, not willing, but if you're not able to answer in the meeting, please reach out and set up some time with me so we can talk more about it. So if a good leader is going to have to cater to the needs of all these different people, especially again, younger generations, unfortunately, with social media and all we got going on with technology, they're less and less inclined to speak in in a group setting. I'll give one other tip. This is a trainer tip. Same with trainers. I'm doing a corporate training on some topic. If I just ask a question, most people won't answer. They want social proof that their answer isn't stupid before they say it to the rest of the room. So one
Mhm.
way is to say, here, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to answer this question. And then we'll kind of debrief as a group. And so then people get that social proof that their answer is a good one and other people actually agree with them. And then they'll
Mhm.
be willing to say it more public.
This I've seen multiple different analyses, if that's the right word, or interpretations or opinions about what is a better approach. Many organizations feel that once you reach a certain size, you shouldn't have one-on-one meetings. You should have only group meetings. I'm of an opinion it's gotten harder in my own life, but I think it's much better for people to have one-on-one meetings because and
100%.
at all levels. I mean, it's like my view, and I'd love to hear your view on this. My view has been that, like we're the blind man or the blind person and the elephant. You're touching various parts of the thing and you realize it's not a snake, it's not a tree. Ultimately, you realize I'm not sure, but I think it's an elephant.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to be a strategic advisor, a strategic leader, a strategic thinker, or a day-to-day manager. If you have touched many parts of the organization, even if it's not everyone at every level. I'm not sure if I'm describing it well, but that's
That's a
my
great
experience.
metaphor. I hadn't heard that. I might borrow that. It's true. Managers should be meeting with their direct reports on a weekly basis. It should be informal. And by that I mean you maybe need it on your calendar to make sure that it happens, but it doesn't have
Sure.
to be some big formal. We all have to prep for it. It's just a touch base. And then skip level meetings is also what you're describing. So
Yes, exactly.
meeting with various levels and making that part of the culture. And we see that a
Yeah.
lot in organizations that aren't doing those manager meetings. And all of a sudden, here comes Paul, the CEO, and it's like, I must be getting fired
Right.
because one on ones aren't part of our culture. And I'll just
That's
say one other thing. One of the worst, toxic, most horrible clients that we went into to help them turn it around that was one of the main problems, was that the top level was up in their tower. They never went down below, and all this stuff was happening down below. And so we suggested you start doing these skip meetings and just start meeting with people several
Yeah.
below you. And that in and of itself was a huge problem solver for their culture.
It's funny. I think many people, and this is maybe, I think many people think the leadership is the person, or the leader is the person sitting at the helm of a big ship looking in the distance with a spyglass every once in a while, making sure there's no iceberg, when the reality is the leader. And frankly, you can use a restaurant analogy. Most great restaurants, the chef comes out and talks to the people and says, what do you like? And tell me the truth. And, give me oh, did you like the dessert? I put a little different cinnamon on top tonight. How can you find out how the experience, unless you talk to the customers, obviously, as a leader, and also talk to the people who deliver the results and people who fix the problems of the customers who are not happy? It seems to me that is just blindness. It's just, it's not even business school. You don't need to go to business school to realize this is a, human condition, right? If
Yeah.
you're in a group of people and you're finding out you're not getting a lot of vibes as things are going well, they're probably not. You have to figure it out. And you're not going to figure it out by looking out the window in your spyglass into the future, right?
Right.
What I would call walk around management. You just walk around discovery of what's going on. And, we may not be super schooled in HR or in people management, but, the only way to do this is kind of probe the organization and figure out what's it all about.
Yeah, you can't, if you're at the top and you're relying on all of your executive VPs or whomever, to your chief whoever's, to report everything to you, and you're not ever getting that information on your own, you're missing out on a lot of extra information. You're getting a biased picture, because we all have bias. So 100% leaders.
And you're probably getting a group of people who may well have gone through a program on so-called managing up. Right. Telling you what you think you should hear about the wonderful product. Don't worry about those returns. Don't worry about those angry customers. It's a small problem. Our business is wonderful. And they see metrics that are not really indicative. I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's like we talked about in the data and figuring out what data people need to see. It's like metrics can be really deceptive, right? It's like, if you look at a curve and you're right over here and it looks like it's going up, well, the curve might have looked like this, and it's a bleep that's going up after a huge down, right? So that's kind of, how do you use data to trick people?
Right.
And that's kind of you having to have an open mind towards that thing.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
Well, I want to also ask you to talk a little about the new book you have out.
Yeah, I'd love to. I love it. I keep it right here next to me. So Wiley asked me to write for their For Dummies series. So the book is ironically titled "Navigating a Toxic Workplace for Dummies." And really,
that's a great achievement.
Yeah, thank you. I feel pretty great about it. Really,
you're
what it is.
Planning on doing a course, right, on that same topic?
Yes. I've actually sent some emails over to you all, letting you know that that's something.
Yeah, well, we have this whole new. We have a whole new essential series, which this would be 1,000% aligned to, and it's really in toxic workplaces. We're doing this essential series for the so-called FLW, frontline workers at Starbucks and Planet Fitness and all of these warehouses that people have real personal experiences. They can't sit down at a computer, watch a course. They can look at their phone and see a TikTok style presentation. So this is fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you, Catherine. Once again, it's always.
I'll just say the book is for all levels. If you're an individual contributor, you've got advice, and there's certainly a lot of advice for HR and leaders around turning culture around.
Thank you. Congratulations. We'll talk to you again on the next Meet the Gurus.
Thank you.
We all love meeting interesting people. Meet the Gurus is my adventure with you, traveling the world, connecting with people all over with different insights from technology and business, entrepreneurship and design, all sorts of things that help us understand what we do in our lives, our careers, and how we can be bigger and better, happier and more satisfied, all the things that we would like to achieve. Come join me.